If someone had told me 10 years ago that my little sister would destroy my marriage, help tear apart my family, and somehow still end up being treated like the victim, I would have laughed in their face. Not because I thought she was incapable of it, because I never imagined my parents would let her. Then again, maybe I should have. Looking back, the signs had always been there. My name is Claire Morgan, and for as long as I can remember, I lived in the shadow of my younger sister, Vanessa. Vanessa was the kind of girl people noticed the second she walked into a room. Blonde hair that always looked professionally styled, perfect smile, perfect skin, perfect grades, perfect dance recitals, perfect everything, at least according to our mother. My mother, Diane, loved both her daughters. That's what she always said. But there was a difference between what she said and what she did. I learned that lesson young. When I turned 16, my parents surprised me with a used silver sedan that had nearly 120,000 miles on it. I was thrilled. I hugged them both. I washed it every weekend. Named it Stella. I loved that car. A year later, Vanessa turned 16. My parents bought her a nearly new Mustang convertible. Red, leather seats, premium sound system, the kind of car that made people turn their heads. I remember standing in our driveway staring at it. Mom noticed, "You should be happy for your sister." I was. At least I tried to be. But even then, something inside me whispered the truth. The rules were different for Vanessa. Always had been. Always would be. When I missed curfew by 20 minutes during senior year because my phone died, I was grounded for 6 weeks. When Vanessa got caught sneaking out to a party and came home smelling like alcohol, Mom blamed peer pressure. Dad nodded. End of discussion. It wasn't one huge thing. It was 1,000 little things. A lifetime of little things. Eventually, I stopped fighting it. I moved out, went to college, built my own life, and honestly, things got better. A lot better. That's because I met Ethan. I was 21 when we met. He was funny, confident, the kind of guy who could make friends with strangers in grocery store checkout lines. I fell hard. So hard it scared me. For the first time in my life, I felt like somebody chose me first. Not second. Not after Vanessa. Me. 3 years later, we got married. The wedding wasn't extravagant. We couldn't afford extravagant. But it was beautiful. Our families came. Our friends came. Even Vanessa managed to act supportive for one whole weekend. I remember standing on the dance floor during our reception, Ethan's arms wrapped around my waist, string lights glowing overhead, thinking, this is it. This is my happy ending. I had no idea it was only the beginning. 6 years passed. Good years. Not perfect years. Nobody's marriage is perfect. We argued over stupid things. Money. House projects. Whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. But we always worked through it. We bought a cozy 2-story house outside Kansas City. Adopted a golden retriever named Murphy. Built routines. Built memories. Built a life. And every year, I felt more certain that marrying Ethan had been the best decision I'd ever made. Meanwhile, Vanessa had practically disappeared. After college, she'd moved to Arizona, a decision I secretly celebrated. Distance made family gatherings easier. She came home for holidays occasionally. Thanksgiving, Christmas, the occasional birthday, usually for 3 or 4 days before disappearing again. From what I heard, she was doing well. She worked in marketing, had a serious boyfriend named Trevor. They'd been together for years, long enough that everyone assumed marriage was coming, including me. Then one Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. I was sitting at my desk when my phone rang. Mom. I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, I answered, "Hey, Mom." Her voice sounded strange, excited, concerned, dramatic, a combination only she could achieve. "Vanessa's coming home," I frowned. "For a visit? No." A pause. "She's moving back." That got my attention. "What happened?" Mom sighed dramatically. "Trevor left her." "What?" "He cheated on her." I leaned back in my chair. "What?" Mom lowered her voice. As if it couldn't get worse, apparently he was cheating with men. I blinked. "What?" That's what Vanessa said. The story sounded bizarre. Trevor had always seemed normal. Quiet, reserved, but normal. Then again, I barely knew him. Over the years, I'd met him exactly 3 times. People hide things. Who was I to say? "When is she coming?" I asked. "Tomorrow." Of course she was. Mom continued. "She's devastated." Translation, prepare to make Vanessa the center of the universe again. The next evening, Ethan and I drove to my parents' house. The moment we walked in, I knew things were bad. Vanessa sat curled up on the couch. Mascara streaked, eyes swollen, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a dramatic image, but for once it seemed genuine. She looked broken. Mom rushed over. "There you are." Vanessa looked up. For a brief second our eyes met. Then she burst into tears. Real tears. Not the manipulative kind I remembered from childhood. The ugly kind. The kind people can't fake. I sat beside her, awkwardly placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry." That was all I could think to say. For several minutes she cried while Mom rubbed her back. Dad stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. Ethan quietly grabbed drinks for everyone. The room felt heavy. Eventually Vanessa began talking. Trevor had apparently ended things with almost no warning. One conversation, one fight, then he was gone. Moved out. Blocked her. Vanished. Leaving her behind with unpaid bills and a lease she couldn't afford. The story sounded awful. Heartbreaking even. As much history as Vanessa and I had, I genuinely felt bad for her. No one deserved that. Not even her. Over the next few weeks, she stayed with my parents, applying for jobs, sending resumes, trying to rebuild. And despite everything, I found myself rooting for her. Maybe she'd changed. Maybe getting knocked down by life had humbled her. Maybe we could finally become real sisters. One evening while Ethan and I were eating dinner, I brought it up. "She's struggling." Ethan looked up from his plate. "Who?" "Vanessa." He nodded. "Yeah." I hesitated, then said the words that would eventually destroy my life. "You know." "What?" "Your company has openings." Ethan set down his fork. "You want me to help her?" "Just look into it." He leaned back, thinking, I might be able to. A small smile appeared on my face. "Really?" "No promises. That's all I'm asking." He shrugged. "I'll see what I can do." I remember feeling relieved, proud even. Maybe this was what family was supposed to be. Helping each other, supporting each other, building bridges. I had absolutely no idea that I had just opened the door and invited disaster straight into my home. Because while I was sleeping peacefully that night, believing I'd done something kind for my little sister, fate had already started setting the trap. And none of us could see it yet. Looking back, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Ethan had simply said no. "No, I can't get her a job. No, I don't have any influence. No, it's not a good fit." Maybe my marriage would have survived. Maybe my family would still be fractured but intact. Maybe I wouldn't have spent years rebuilding myself from the ground up. But that's not what happened. 2 weeks after our conversation, Ethan came home wearing a satisfied smile. I was making dinner when he walked into the kitchen and loosened his tie. "Good news." I turned around. "What?" "Your sister got the job." I smiled immediately. "Seriously?" "Seriously." I crossed the kitchen and hugged him. "Thank you." "Don't thank me." She interviewed well. Still, I was grateful. Vanessa called me that evening. One of the first times she'd voluntarily called me in years. "Guess who starts Monday?" I laughed. "You already know I know." "Mom told you?" "Ethan did." There was a pause. Then she said something unexpected. "Tell him thank you for me." That should have been my first clue. Not because she thanked him, because of how she said it. There was warmth in her voice, a softness. At the time, I assumed it was gratitude. Now I know better. The first month seemed normal. Vanessa threw herself into work. Mom couldn't stop talking about it. Her supervisor loves her. She's already making friends. Everyone says she's a natural. I heard it all. Every phone call, every family dinner, every conversation somehow circled back to Vanessa. The old pattern was back. But I didn't care. I had my own life, my own marriage, my own happiness. Or so I thought. The first strange moment happened at a Sunday barbecue. Dad was grilling burgers. Mom was making her famous potato salad. Neighbors wandered between yards carrying drinks. Typical Midwestern summer. I was helping Mom in the kitchen when I heard laughter outside. Not ordinary laughter, the kind that comes from a private joke. I looked through the window. Vanessa and Ethan were standing near the patio. Everyone else was spread across the yard, yet somehow those two were in their own little world. Vanessa said something. Ethan nearly doubled over laughing. Then she shoved his shoulder playfully. He shoved her back, both smiling, both completely absorbed in each other. A strange feeling twisted in my stomach. Not jealousy, not yet. Just discomfort. I immediately hated myself for feeling it. They worked together. Of course they'd have inside jokes. Of course they'd talk. I pushed the thought away. Then came the dinners. At first, Vanessa joined us occasionally, then frequently, then constantly. Somehow she was always around. Tuesday night? Vanessa stopped by. Thursday night? Vanessa happened to be nearby. Saturday afternoon? Vanessa wanted to hang out. Even Murphy, our golden retriever, started greeting her like she lived there. One evening, I noticed she'd arrived before me. Again, I walked through the front door and heard voices from the kitchen, laughing, talking, comfortable, too comfortable. I found them sitting at the island drinking coffee. Coffee at 6:30 in the evening. "What are you two doing?" I asked. Both looked up. For a split second, they seemed startled. Then Ethan smiled. "Just talking." "About?" "Work. Always work, every single time. Work." I kissed Ethan, hugged my sister, pretended nothing bothered me, but that strange feeling returned, a little stronger this time. A few weeks later, I met my friend Jenna for lunch. Jenna had known me since college, the kind of friend who tells uncomfortable truths. We were halfway through our sandwiches when she asked, "So what's going on with your sister?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" She and Ethan seem close. The words hit harder than they should have. I tried to laugh. "They work together." "Maybe." I stared at her. "What does that mean?" Jenna shrugged. "Maybe nothing." "Jenna," she sighed, "I'm just saying what I've noticed." "What have you noticed?" "Every time I see them, they're talking. They work together." "I know. But," she hesitated, then said carefully, "it feels like they're always looking for each other." I felt my stomach tighten. "You're imagining things." "Maybe." She took a sip of iced tea, then added quietly, "Just pay attention." The rest of lunch felt uncomfortable. I spent the drive home angry. Not at Ethan. Not at Vanessa. At Jenna. How dare she plant that idea in my head? How dare she make me question my husband, my marriage, my family? By the time I got home, I'd convinced myself she was wrong. Completely wrong. Then the little things started piling up. The kind of things that don't mean much individually. But together they form a picture. A dangerous one. One Friday evening, Ethan received a text. His phone lit up while he was in the shower. I wasn't snooping. I simply glanced over. The screen displayed a name, Vanessa. Nothing unusual, until another message appeared. Then another, then another. 4 messages in less than a minute. The phone buzzed repeatedly. I picked it up, not to read it, just to take it to him. Then the screen lit again. One line appeared in the preview. "Can you believe what happened today?" Before I could see more, the message disappeared. I set the phone down, suddenly feeling guilty. When Ethan came out, I casually mentioned it. "Your sister texted." "My sister? My sister?" "Oh," he grabbed the phone, looked at it, then smiled. "What?" "Nothing. What happened today?" "Just work drama." Work. Again, always work. The real turning point happened about 6 months after Vanessa started working there. A random Wednesday. Completely ordinary. I left for work at 9:30. Same as always. Made the bed. Same as always. Fed Murphy. Locked the house. Nothing unusual. Nothing memorable. Then I came home. The second I entered the bedroom, something felt off. I couldn't explain it. Not immediately. I just knew. The room looked the same. The blankets looked the same. Everything looked normal. Yet something wasn't right. Then I saw it. The pillows. I stared. Confused. Every morning when I make the bed, the pillow openings face outward. Always. It's a weird habit. One of those tiny routines you don't think about. 2 pillows had been turned inward, facing the center, a meaningless detail to anyone else. To me, it felt wrong. I stood there staring, trying to make sense of it. When Ethan got home later, I brought it up. Casually. At least I tried to sound casual. Random question. "Okay. Were you in the bedroom today?" His eyes flickered, just briefly, but I saw it. A flash of surprise. "Why?" "The pillows were different," he laughed. "Pillows?" "Yeah." "No? You weren't in there?" "Nope." "What about Vanessa?" The smile disappeared, only for a moment. Then it returned. "Why would Vanessa be in our bedroom?" "Good question. Why would she?" I forced a laugh. "I don't know." He kissed my forehead. "You're overthinking." Maybe I was. Maybe not. That night I barely slept. The next morning I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked Ethan's phone. I hated myself for it. Actually hated myself, but I did it anyway. I waited until he was asleep, then quietly picked it up. Nothing. No suspicious texts, no secret photos, no hidden messages. Nothing. I checked email. Nothing. Social media. Nothing. Everything looked clean. Completely clean. I felt relieved. Ashamed too. Maybe I really was losing my mind. Maybe stress was making me paranoid. Maybe Jenna's comments had poisoned my thinking. Maybe the thought stopped, because suddenly I realized something. If two people spend all day together at work, then spend most evenings together afterward, why would they need to text? That realization sat heavily in my chest, like a stone. A week later, my parents hosted another family gathering, Dad's birthday. Everyone attended. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors. The house buzzed with conversation. For a while, everything felt normal. Then it happened. One tiny moment. One tiny moment that changed everything. I was carrying drinks from the kitchen. Vanessa stood near the hallway. Ethan was walking past her. Nothing unusual. Then she reached out. Her fingers brushed his arm. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Just enough to stop him. He turned toward her. She leaned closer, whispered something. I couldn't hear what. Then something happened that made my blood run cold. For one brief second, their foreheads touched. Not accidentally. Not as part of a joke. Intentionally. Intimately. A moment so fast most people missed it. But I didn't. I saw every second. Ethan immediately jerked back, as if he'd remembered where he was. Vanessa looked directly at me and smiled. Not warmly. Not innocently. A smile that sent ice through my veins. A smile that seemed to say, "You saw that." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I couldn't focus, couldn't eat, couldn't think. The image kept replaying, again, and again, and again. By the time Ethan and I drove home, I felt sick. Maybe there was an explanation, maybe there wasn't. But one thing had become painfully clear. I could no longer ignore what was happening. I needed answers, and I was terrified of what those answers might be. 3 days later, I booked a romantic weekend getaway for Ethan and me. A luxury hotel, a beautiful suite, a chance to reconnect, and a chance to ask the question that had begun haunting my every waking moment. I didn't know it yet, but before that weekend ended, my entire life was going to collapse. There are moments in life when you can feel disaster approaching. Not see it, not prove it, just feel it. Like standing on a beach and noticing the tide suddenly pulling away from shore. Everyone else sees water. You see a tsunami. The week leading up to our getaway was torture. Every smile from Ethan felt suspicious. Every mention of Vanessa felt loaded. Every time his phone buzzed, my stomach twisted. Yet I still desperately wanted to be wrong. That's the part people don't understand. When you suspect someone you love is betraying you, you don't want confirmation. You want relief. You want evidence that you're crazy. You want somebody to laugh and say, "Seriously? That's what you've been worried about?" I wanted that more than anything. Instead, I got the truth. The trip was Ethan's idea originally. Months earlier, he'd mentioned how we hadn't spent quality time together in a while. Back then, it sounded romantic. Now it felt like an interrogation room with room service. We drove to Chicago on a Friday morning. The city's skyline appeared on the horizon beneath gray clouds. Normally, I loved Chicago. The energy, the restaurants, the lakefront. This time, I barely noticed any of it. I spent most of the drive staring out the window while Ethan talked about work. Work. Always work. At one point, he mentioned a project he and Vanessa had been handling together. I immediately felt my chest tighten. He didn't notice, or pretended not to. The hotel was beautiful. A luxury high-rise overlooking the river, floor-to-ceiling windows, marble bathroom, a bottle of champagne waiting in the room, the kind of place couples visit to celebrate anniversaries, or save marriages. That first evening almost fooled me. Almost. We walked through downtown, had dinner at a rooftop restaurant, shared appetizers, laughed. For a few hours, things felt normal, comfortable, familiar, dangerously familiar. The version of Ethan I'd fallen in love with seemed to reappear. The man who made me laugh until my stomach hurt. The man who remembered tiny details about conversations from years earlier. The man who always reached for my hand while crossing the street. At one point, he wrapped his arm around my shoulders. I leaned against him. And for a moment, I hated myself because I wanted to forget. I wanted to stop questioning. I wanted to believe. But every time I looked into his eyes, I remembered that smile Vanessa had given me. That knowing smile. The one that said she knew something I didn't. That night, we drank wine, talked, made love, and afterward, Ethan fell asleep almost immediately. I didn't. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing, trying to understand how someone could look so peaceful while slowly destroying another person's life. Then I hated myself again, because maybe he wasn't. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe tomorrow I'd ask the question and everything would finally make sense. Eventually, exhaustion won. I fell asleep sometime after 3 in the morning. The next day started perfectly, which made what happened later even worse. We visited museums, walked along the Riverwalk, had lunch at a small cafe. For hours, I almost convinced myself to let it go. Maybe some things are better left alone. Maybe suspicion wasn't enough. Maybe marriage required trust. Maybe. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and immediately turned the screen over. Face down, my heart sank. Not because he got a text, because of how quickly he hit it. The movement was automatic, practiced, instinctive, like he'd done it before. Many times. He looked up, caught me noticing, smiled, just too quickly. What? Nothing. He nodded, neither of us said another word, but something changed. The tension returned, stronger than ever. That evening we returned to the hotel. Dinner reservations weren't until 7. We had nearly 2 hours to kill. 2 hours. 2 people. One question. The question I'd been carrying for months. I stood near the window watching traffic below. Cars crawled through downtown streets. Tiny lights moving through the city. Behind me, Ethan adjusted his watch, humming quietly, completely unaware that my entire world was balanced on what happened next. Or maybe he knew. Maybe he'd known for months. Maybe that's why he'd agreed to the trip. Maybe he'd been waiting too. My hands were shaking. I shoved them into my pockets, then turned around. Ethan? Yeah? My voice sounded strange. Small. Fragile. I almost lost my nerve. Almost. Then I remembered the pillows, the text messages, the forehead touch, the smile, test, and suddenly I couldn't stop the words. Are you having an affair with my sister? Silence. Complete silence. The room seemed to freeze. Even the sounds from the street below disappeared. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared at me, and in that moment I knew, before he spoke, before he moved, before he cried, I knew, because innocent people react differently. They get angry, confused, offended. They don't look like their soul just left their body. Ethan looked destroyed. His face drained of color, his eyes immediately filled with tears, and my heart shattered, because that was my answer. Oh my God, I whispered. Ethan lowered his head. I took a step backward. No. He covered his face. No, 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 no. Claire, no. The word exploded out of me. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of a chair to steady myself. Tell me I'm wrong. He started crying. Actually, tell me. Silence. Tell me. Then he whispered the one word that destroyed 9 years of my life. I'm sorry. I felt something inside me break. Not emotionally, physically, like an actual fracture, like a bone snapping. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I just heard. All I could do was stare at him, at the man I'd trusted more than anyone on earth, the man I'd built my future around, the man who had chosen my sister. How long? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Ethan wiped his face. Several months. Months. Not a mistake, not a drunken kiss, not one terrible decision. Months. A relationship. A secret life. An entire betrayal happening right under my nose. How? He looked away. We spent a lot of time together. I laughed. The sound horrified even me. It wasn't laughter, it was pain. We spent a lot of time together. Claire, no. I held up my hand. No. Explain. His shoulders sagged. It wasn't planned. Of course not. It never is. We just connected. Connected. I almost threw something. Connected. Such a harmless word. Such a disgusting word. People connect over coffee. People connect over hobbies. You don't accidentally connect your way into an affair with your wife's sister. Did she start it? He hesitated. Too long. Did you? I don't know. That answer told me everything. Both of them. Both guilty, both willing. Neither innocent. Then came the question I was almost afraid to ask. Almost. Have you been sleeping together? He started crying harder, and somehow that made me even angrier, because tears didn't erase what he'd done. Tears didn't make him the victim. Tears didn't undo months of lies. Answer me. A long pause, then a nod. I closed my eyes. The image appeared instantly. My husband, my sister, together. I thought I might be sick. Then another thought hit me. A memory, the pillows, the bed, the strange feeling. I opened my eyes, suddenly terrified. Have you been doing it in our house? Ethan froze. The silence was answer enough. No. The word came out as a whisper. He looked down, ashamed, guilty, broken. I already knew, but I asked anyway. Our bedroom? His face collapsed, and then he nodded. Just once, a tiny movement that somehow hurt more than everything else. The bed. Our bed. The place where we talked about children. where we'd celebrated anniversaries, where we'd comforted each other through loss and stress and life. They'd taken that too. I couldn't stay in the room another second. I grabbed my purse. Ethan stood up immediately. Claire, please. I ignored him. Please. I ignored him. Can we talk? I laughed again. A horrible sound. What exactly is there left to talk about? He cried harder. I'm sorry. Sorry. The most useless word in the English language. Sorry didn't undo anything. Sorry didn't erase images from my mind. Sorry didn't give me my life back. I walked toward the door. Ethan followed. Please don't leave. I turned. For the first time since his confession, I looked directly at him. Really looked. And what I saw wasn't the man I married. That man was gone. Maybe he'd been gone for months, maybe longer. Standing in front of me was a stranger. A liar. A coward. A man who had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. And suddenly I felt nothing. No love. No hope. Nothing. Just emptiness. Call Vanessa. He blinked. What? Call her. Claire? Call her. Confusion spread across his face. I stepped closer. If she's worth destroying our marriage over, she can come comfort you. The words hit him like a slap. Good. I wanted them to. Then I walked out. I drove for nearly 6 hours, crying, screaming, pulling over repeatedly because I couldn't see through the tears. At one point, I seriously considered driving straight through the night and never stopping, just disappearing. Starting over somewhere nobody knew me, somewhere nobody had ever heard the names Ethan or Vanessa. By the time I finally reached home, it was nearly midnight. The house looked exactly the same, but it wasn't. Nothing was. I sat in my car staring at the front door, knowing that once I walked inside, my old life was officially over. Then my phone rang. It was my mother, and somehow, before I even answered, I knew. I knew this nightmare was about to get much worse, because my parents weren't as clueless as I'd believed, not even close, and what my mother was about to tell me would prove it. The phone rang 3 times before I answered. I stared at my mother's name on the screen, my hand trembling. Normally, seeing her call this late would have made me worry. Maybe Dad had fallen. Maybe someone was in the hospital. Maybe there had been an emergency. Now, after everything Ethan had confessed, a different feeling settled over me. Dread. Pure dread. I answered. Hello? There was a pause. Then my mother's voice came through. Claire? I immediately knew something was wrong. Not because she sounded upset, because she sounded careful, like someone walking through a minefield. Yes. Another pause. Then she sighed. I think we need to talk. My stomach dropped. I closed my eyes. About what? More silence. Too much silence. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. Vanessa is here. I froze. What? She's at our house. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Of course she was. Where else would she go? I should have hung up. Instead, I asked the question that would haunt me for years. How long have you known? Silence. A long silence. The kind that tells you everything before words arrive. My chest tightened. No. I whispered it before she could answer. No. Claire? No. The scream echoed through the car. How long? Mom inhaled sharply. Then she said it. A few weeks. A few weeks. Not months. Not years. But weeks. Weeks. Weeks of knowing my husband was sleeping with my sister. Weeks of family dinners. Weeks of smiling in my face. Weeks of pretending. I felt physically sick. You knew. Claire, please listen. You knew. It wasn't that simple. I laughed. The sound came out cracked and ugly. Really? Explain the complicated part. Your father and I were trying to figure out how to handle it. I nearly dropped the phone. Handle it? Handle it. My husband was having an affair with my sister, and they were discussing strategy, like it was a tax problem, a leaky roof. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. When I finally got inside my house, I sat on the kitchen floor, not the couch, not a chair. The floor. I didn't have the energy for anything else. The conversation with my mother replayed endlessly. She knew. Dad knew. Vanessa knew they knew. And somehow nobody thought I deserved the truth. Nobody. At around 1 in the morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. I'm so sorry. I stared at it. Then another. Can we please talk? Then another. I never wanted to hurt you. I blocked his number. The messages stopped for approximately 6 minutes. Then they started from another number. I blocked that one too. Then another. Then another. By dawn, I'd blocked 6 different numbers. I never responded once. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney. Saying the words out loud felt surreal. I'm looking to file for divorce. The receptionist didn't sound surprised. She probably heard those words 50 times a day. For me, they felt impossible. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to us. Not to me. Not after everything we'd built. Yet there I was, scheduling consultations, discussing assets, talking about legal separation. The marriage I'd spent nearly a decade protecting was being reduced to paperwork. And somehow the paperwork hurt less than the betrayal. 3 days later, Ethan came home. Not to reconcile, not to fix things, to collect his belongings. I stayed in the living room while he packed. The silence was unbearable. Occasionally, I heard drawers opening upstairs, closet doors sliding, suitcases zipping. Every sound felt like another nail in the coffin. Eventually, he came downstairs. He looked terrible. Dark circles, red eyes, unshaven. Good. I hoped he felt awful. He stopped near the front door. Claire, I didn't look up. Please. Nothing. Can we talk? No. Just 5 minutes. No, his voice cracked. I'm sorry. I finally looked at him. You keep saying that? He swallowed hard. I mean it? Then you shouldn't have slept with my sister. His face crumpled. For a second, I thought he might cry again. Instead, he nodded, picked up his bags, and walked out. The door closed behind him, and just like that, 9 years ended with a click. The next bombshell arrived a week later. Not from Ethan, not from Vanessa, from my cousin Rachel. She called while I was grocery shopping. Have you seen it? I frowned. Seen what? A pause. Then Facebook. My stomach sank. I already knew. Somehow I knew. I opened the app, and there it was, a smiling selfie. Vanessa standing in front of a mirror, Ethan behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his lips pressed against her cheek, both grinning, like they had just won the lottery. The caption read, "Sometimes life leads you exactly where you're meant to be." For several seconds, I simply stared, unable to process the cruelty. The affair was barely public. The divorce hadn't even started. And there they were, showing off, celebrating, parading their betrayal for the world to see. Then I noticed something else. I had been tagged. My hands started shaking. She had tagged me. My own sister had tagged me. As if I should be happy for them. As if this were some beautiful love story. As if she hadn't helped destroy my life. I immediately deleted the app. A few minutes later, a text arrived. From Vanessa. Sorry, sis. Didn't mean to tag you. No hard feelings. You'll find your soulmate someday too. I stared at the message, then blocked her. Every account, every platform, every possible avenue. Gone. Forever. Or so I hoped. A few days later, I drove to my parents' house. I wasn't planning to. Actually, I'd promised myself I wouldn't. But anger has a funny way of changing plans. When Mom opened the door, she looked relieved. That relief disappeared when she saw my face. Claire? Where is she? Mom hesitated. Not here. Of course she wasn't. I stepped inside anyway. Dad sat in his recliner watching television. He muted it immediately. Nobody spoke. Finally, I held up my phone. The Facebook post was still on the screen. Did you see this? Mom looked away. That was answer enough. You saw it? Claire? You saw it. My voice echoed through the room. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Mom sighed. It wasn't appropriate. I stared at her, then laughed, not because anything was funny, because it was unbelievable. It wasn't appropriate? Obviously. She slept with my husband. Mom crossed her arms. We know. And you're worried about appropriate? Her face hardened. Then she said the sentence that permanently ended our relationship. The sentence I would remember for the rest of my life. Vanessa made mistakes. I blinked. Mistakes. Plural. Like forgetting milk at the grocery store. Like missing an appointment. Not months of betrayal. Mistakes. Mom continued. But she deserves happiness too. The room went silent. Even Dad looked uncomfortable. I stared at her. Certain I must have misheard. You can't be serious. I'm trying to be realistic. Realistic. The word landed like a punch. My marriage had exploded. My sister had helped light the fuse, and somehow my mother's concern was making sure Vanessa remained happy, the golden child. Still, after all these years. Still. I turned toward Dad. Surely he wouldn't agree. Surely somebody in this house had lost their mind. Dad? He looked down, then up, then back down again. I waited. Finally he spoke. 3 words. I agree with Mom. That was it. No defense, no explanation, no outrage, nothing. 3 words. And just like that, I lost both parents. I left without another word. Mom followed me to the driveway. Claire! I kept walking. Claire, please! I opened my car door. Families work through things. I stopped, slowly turned around. Mom looked hopeful, as if she'd finally reached me. I stared at her for several seconds, then spoke calmly. calmer than I'd felt in weeks. No. What? Healthy families work through things. Her expression faltered. I continued. Toxic families excuse them. Then I got in my car and drove away. Over the next month, the divorce moved quickly. Shockingly quickly. Almost suspiciously quickly. Then I found out why. Vanessa had moved in with Ethan. Immediately. Practically before the ink dried on the separation papers. The speed of it stunned me. Either they had no shame, or this affair had been going on much longer than either admitted. Probably both. Then came another surprise. Initially, Ethan offered me everything. The house, most of the savings, nearly all the assets. How? I suspected guilt was driving it. And honestly, I didn't care why. I accepted. For about 48 hours. Then suddenly his attitude changed. Lawyers became involved. Demands appeared. Negotiations shifted. The house had to be sold. Assets had to be split. Everything changed overnight. I knew exactly why. Vanessa, she was already in his ear, already managing him, already controlling the situation. And for the first time I felt something unexpected. Not sadness, not grief, pity. Because Ethan thought he'd won. He thought he'd stolen some grand love story. What he'd actually done was hand his life over to the most selfish person I'd ever known. And eventually, he'd learn that lesson. The hard way. Meanwhile, I was done. Done with Ethan. Done with Vanessa. Done with my parents. Done with Missouri. Done with all of it. Within weeks, the house would be sold. Within months, I'd be gone. And nobody in my family would know where I went. Not my mother. Not my father. Just not my sister. Nobody. I was disappearing. Starting over. Building a new life. A better life. What I didn't know was that fate wasn't finished with any of us yet. Because 4 years later, the people I was leaving behind would come crashing back into my life. And when they did, they'd bring an entirely new disaster with them. The day I left Missouri, it rained. Not a dramatic thunderstorm. Not the kind of rain you see in movies when somebody's life is falling apart. Just a steady gray drizzle that turned the highways slick and blurred the landscape beyond my windshield. It felt fitting. My marriage was over. My family was gone. The house had sold. The divorce papers were nearly finalized. Everything I'd spent years building had collapsed in less than 6 months. And now I was driving away from the ruins. Alone. Or at least that's what I thought. Murphy sat in the back seat. My golden retriever had been my shadow through the entire divorce. When I cried, he lay beside me. When I couldn't sleep, he curled up near the bed. When I spent hours staring blankly at walls, wondering how my life had gone so wrong, he stayed close. The only family member who hadn't betrayed me had 4 legs and shed constantly. As I drove north, Murphy rested his head between the front seats. I reached back and scratched behind his ears. You and me, buddy? His tail thumped once. That was enough. For the first time in months, I smiled. Minnesota wasn't random. A former college friend lived there. Jenna. The same Jenna who had warned me months before. The same Jenna I dismissed. She had called every week after the affair exploded, never judging. Never saying, I told you so. Just showing up. When she heard I wanted a fresh start, she'd immediately offered help. Move here. You serious? Completely. I don't know anybody. You know me. That had been enough. 3 months later, I signed a lease on a small apartment outside Minneapolis. Nothing fancy, 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, 2nd floor unit. But it was mine. Nobody had cheated on me there. Nobody had lied to me there. Nobody had betrayed me there. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and possibility. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. Healing wasn't quick. Anyone who tells you otherwise has never survived real betrayal. The first year was brutal. I cried unexpectedly, at grocery stores, at gas stations, while folding laundry. A random song would play, and suddenly I'd be sitting in my car sobbing. Certain memories hurt the most, the ordinary ones. Not the wedding, not anniversaries, not vacations. The little moments. Making coffee together. Watching television on rainy weekends. Arguing over what movie to watch. Those were the memories that ambushed me, because they felt real. And now I questioned all of them. Had he loved me then? Had he already been lying? How much of our life had been genuine? I tortured myself with those questions for months. Then finally, Jenna said something that changed everything. You know you'll never get those answers, right? We were sitting on her patio drinking wine. I stared at her. What do you mean? Even if Ethan told you everything, you still wouldn't know what was true. I frowned. She continued, "You keep trying to solve a puzzle. Because I want answers." "I know." She leaned forward. "But closure isn't information." That sentence stayed with me. Closure isn't information. Maybe she was right. Maybe the details didn't matter anymore. The marriage was dead regardless. Knowing exactly how it died wouldn't bring it back. A few weeks later, I started therapy. Best decision I ever made. The first session was awful. I cried through half of it. The second session wasn't much better. Neither was the third. But eventually things changed. Slowly. Painfully. One breakthrough at a time. My therapist pointed out something I'd never considered. "You talk about losing your husband." I nodded. "Of course." "You also lost your parents." That hit harder. Because she was right. The affair had been devastating. But my parents choosing Vanessa? That wound ran deeper. I'd expected betrayal from a cheating husband. I never expected it from my own mother. Or my father. Especially my father. His silence still haunted me. The way he'd simply sat there and agreed. No fight. No defense. Nothing. As though I wasn't worth defending. Understanding that pain became the real focus of therapy. And eventually, little by little, I started healing. Then came dating. Or rather, my disastrous attempt at dating. Jenna insisted. "You need to get back out there." No. Yes. No. Claire. No. She won, unfortunately. 3 weeks later, I went on a date with a guy named Brian. On paper, he seemed great. Financial analyst, never married, loved dogs, owned a condo, normal, respectable, safe. The date lasted 43 minutes. I know because I checked. Repeatedly. The first red flag appeared when he spent 15 minutes explaining why waiters didn't deserve tips. The second arrived when he informed me that women were naturally worse drivers because of biology. The third happened when he referred to himself as an alpha male. I nearly choked on my drink. By the end of the evening, I was seriously considering faking my own kidnapping. When I got home, Jenna called. "How'd it go?" I stared at the ceiling. "I'm becoming a nun." She laughed so hard she dropped her phone. For nearly a year after that, I avoided dating entirely. Work, friends, therapy, Murphy. That was my life. And honestly, I was happy. Not ecstatic, not completely healed, but stable. For the first time since the divorce, I wasn't surviving. I was living. That's when I met Lucas. The first time I saw him, he was arguing with a delivery driver. Not angrily, passionately. There was a difference. I was picking up lunch at a local restaurant when I overheard the conversation. Apparently the wrong food order had been delivered. The driver looked terrified. Lucas looked frustrated. Then something unexpected happened. Lucas stopped, took a breath, and said, "Listen, this obviously isn't your fault." The driver visibly relaxed. Lucas smiled. "We'll figure it out." No yelling, no insults, no power trip, just basic decency, which after everything I'd been through felt strangely attractive. A week later, I returned. Then again, then again. Partly because the food was incredible. Partly because I found myself hoping Lucas would be there. Eventually, he noticed. One afternoon, he walked over carrying a coffee refill. "You know?" I looked up. "What?" "What?" "If you keep coming here this often, people are going to think you like the place." I laughed. "Maybe I do." "Good." He grinned. "Because I own it." That was the beginning. Not fireworks, not dramatic romance, just conversation. Easy conversation. The kind I'd forgotten existed. Over the next few months, we got to know each other. Lucas owned the restaurant with his younger brother, Nate. Both worked ridiculous hours. Both loved what they did. Their family was constantly around. Parents, aunts, cousins, grandparents. It seemed like somebody's relative was always stopping by. At first, that intimidated me. Then it fascinated me, because they actually liked each other. Not pretended. Actually liked each other. Nobody played favorites. Nobody manipulated. Nobody weaponized guilt. The concept felt almost foreign. One evening, Lucas invited me to dinner after closing. Nothing fancy, just leftovers from the kitchen and conversation. Hours passed. Neither of us noticed. At some point, he asked about my divorce. I tensed immediately. Most people became awkward when the story came out. Lucas didn't. He listened. Really listened. Never interrupted. Never judged. When I finished, he sat quietly for a moment. Then said, "They didn't deserve you." That was it. No speeches, no dramatic declarations, just 6 words. And somehow they meant everything. Because for years I'd wondered if I wasn't enough. Not pretty enough, not exciting enough, not interesting enough. Maybe that's why Ethan chose Vanessa. Maybe that's why my parents always preferred her. Lucas looked directly at me, as if he could read my thoughts. They didn't deserve you. For the first time, I started believing it. 2 years later, Lucas proposed. It happened during a family barbecue, ironically enough, the very type of gathering I once hated. His entire family was there, laughing, cooking, playing games, living. Lucas got down on one knee beside the lake. I cried immediately, before he even opened the ring box. The answer was already yes. It had been yes for months, maybe longer. When he slipped the ring onto my finger, cheers erupted around us. His mother cried. His father cried. His grandmother cried. Even Murphy barked excitedly. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly what a healthy family looked like, and I was finally part of one. A few months later, while planning the wedding, I came home from work and found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. No warning. Just my name. I almost threw it away. Something stopped me. Back upstairs, I opened it. Inside was a wedding invitation. My stomach immediately dropped, because I recognized the names before I even finished reading. Vanessa Morgan, Ethan Carter. For several seconds, I simply stared, unable to believe the audacity. Then another folded piece of paper slipped from the envelope. A letter. From my parents. And as I began reading it, wounds I thought had healed started reopening all over again, because apparently my family wasn't done trying to destroy my peace. Not even close.